So I've had the system up and running for a couple of days now. I'm doing basically a little burn-in. It's ran solid, so I'm very happy with that. There's a couple of details I need to attend to that we'll take care of in this video. So let me go ahead and power it down. I hate to just turn it off. I don't have a terminal hooked up. Trying to remember here. It seemed like, well, I'll take a guess here. Can I hold it? It's holding. It seemed like if I held a button down, it would shut it off, and or maybe it just reset it. Yeah, we're back in lamp test. Well, I'm just going to pull the plug and hope I don't mess anything up. So one of the things we looked at when I kind of put it together, hopefully I can get this in camera, is this large gap here in the connector where the connector isn't seated all the way down. And in reading the manual, what he wants you to do is trim a little bit off each one of these posts so it sits down a little more flush. So we'll tackle that. And then we've got to come up with something better here to insulate than just blue tape. So I'll look for a piece of plastic or something similar. And then it becomes how to shorten these spacers up. Not really exactly sure in my head yet how we're going to do this. These were just put on finger tight, which should be more than sufficient. And I've got a little dog outside of the lab here looking at me. He came up the stairs himself, which is kind of unusual. So I need to take really a millimeter or two off each of these. And I'm sitting here trying to think how I might do this. I don't know that an X-Acto is going to cut that nylon. That's probably a little too much. I don't know if I can score it all the way around and snap it off. If I'm going to end up with the flush cutters. I don't know, that's not working as well as I would have liked. The other pair of glasses, so I have a little more detail of what I'm doing. Looks like lengthwise I took pretty much as much off as I wanted to. There's a little bit of a burr left here. So we'll hit all three of these kind of the same way. I'm just using the flush cutters here to kind of scribe all the way around. Just slowly kind of cut down through until I feel it start to loosen up. And that one didn't cut cut very straight. Again, it's not critical. Length is pretty close. The one I scored with the blade seemed to cut better. Kind of get in there to the score line. Again, not perfectly flush. But it is what it is. Little nut to start here again. And it was the two holes here. He's only using 3 posts when there's actually holes for 4, as I recall, and there are holes for all 4 posts. I think I'll go with the 2 posts here by the USB and an Ethernet connector, just because I think that's probably give me the most support here up against these connectors, so they don't short up against the board. There's still decent height there. In this case, I'm just holding the bolt up against the back side of the board and then catching the threads going through a little bit easier. Remove the tape. Set him back down in place. And he sits up much flusher. And yeah, there is not a lot of clearance there. When I trimmed the LED leads in here, there's actually, I left a fair amount of length on them. So I'm going to trim those down a little bit. Part of the fear here is even if I do this and I see that gap, if I'm wrangling cables in and out, there's a chance I could create a short. That helped. Those are still really close. So totally agree with his assessment that some kind of insulation there would be good. So it really becomes a question of what have I got here handy that might make insulation for that. I don't know if just some electrical tape might be enough. The question becomes finding electrical tape. It's the one thing that no matter how many rolls I have, there's never a roll handy. It always ends up lost someplace. There's a roll. This is regular vinyl tape. I'm trying not to stretch it. Actually, that is pretty beat up there. So what length does that need to be? That should be good there. Of course, a sharp lead could poke up through that pretty easily. Yeah, I'm aware I'm doing a big chunk of this off camera. About there. Just trying to get little squares that are about the sizes of the tops of these packages. Just as kind of an extra layer. And then I'm going to take one more piece. Let's see, with that in place. Those middle two sets of pins are the ones that I have the most worry about, so I'm going to double the tape up over those. And the one thing I didn't take into account was the screw holes. Being careful here with the blade not to scratch the board. That gets the mounting screw holes uncovered. I've got that off by an entire row of pins. Still see gaps everywhere. We've got the tape just for the extra protection. The board's now pretty close to flush. There's a little bit of gap on that one end of the connector that's not super critical. Take a little bit more off just so the connector ends up in the flush. I'm way overdoing what needs to be done here. I'm not actually going to screw it in place at this point, just because it'll be easier to solder, I think, with it off. But I'm generally satisfied with how that's come together. So we'll call that good. So that was a detail that needed to be hit. I think another thing I'm going to do just so it's done in advance. Let's get the LED panel up and off if I can. Now it's really on tight down here on this end. I'm going to add the headers. Get a little leaf of wire out of there. I'm going to add in the headers for this 3-pin header block here. The board on. What kind of depth have I got? I think I'm going to preload headers. Potentially, and sockets. Yeah, I'm gonna. These devices must go on the front of the board where the silk screen is. I think I'm just going to preload some sockets, get that header preloaded for the is it I2C or SPI? I don't remember, for that serial port, because I will want to play with that down here for expansion cards. Well, for serial devices, I've read a couple good articles on people creating drivers for RSX11 and the Pi, etc., to talk to barometer and temperature sensor, which is pretty cool. There's a free GPIO pin there, and there's the 3 there. Let me see if I can scare up my box of headers. Let's see if I can find some headers that I think will work in there. They need to be bend at 90 degrees, and I like some that are pre-bent. Used to have a bunch in here, but I've slowly used them all up. Well, I may not have any. It's slowly all gotten used over time. If there's any remnants down in here. Let's see anything in there. Huh. Well, I might not have any luck here finding anything pre-bent at 90 degrees that I can use. That's disappointing. That doesn't do me any good. It's a 2x3 and not a 1x3. Well, crud. Maybe we're not going to put in headers at this point. Can always be added later. right here. Should work. Nice, okay. That'll help. Keep those pre-soldered while it's out of the case. And these are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 16 pin sockets. Which I should have plenty of. And of course I do have plenty of. I just want a matched pair. This is a huge mix of different body styles. Those are really cheap single wipe sockets. I will not be using those. That's a double wipe. I didn't know I had even any single wipes in here. That's there's a match set. Tack down a couple of corners, push them up flush. Never enough room on the bench, ever, ever, ever. That one felt like it was already flush. Kind of surprising. No, that one certainly isn't. Well, I guess they are. So we'll solder these up. I'm debating whether to add the capacitors ahead of time. I've got some old Max 232s that require 1 microfarad caps, and then the more modern ones will use 0.1 microfarad discs, which is what he's laid the board out for, although the older ones would work, although the electrolytics are fairly tall. So I think I'll leave the caps out for now. Would be really fun to get this thing set up with real RS-232 ports to be able to drive old style serial terminals like VT100s, those kind of things, although they're really difficult to find anymore. So I need to be able to clip 3 pins off of this without breaking it, and that should be rather interesting to do. Okay, that's going to work. I'm going to pull one of the pins out of it and then cut where that pin went through to get me a 3-pin block. And then I'll pull another pin out here, and I'll cut this one down to the 1-pin block. And we will look at getting those soldered in. Might be a little bit tricky, because I can't get a good grip on it. That went in there nice and tight on its own. I don't think I need any tape. wonder what she's barking at down there. By using the 90-degree pins, we have plenty of room to connect to them up underneath the Pi. If you were straight pins, the connectors would bottom out against the Pi. Of course, if you had them on the top, I think I just got a solder bridge, I did. If you had them up against the top of the board, that actually went in there fairly tight as well. Will it stay in place long enough for me to solder? Or will the act of soldering cause it to fall out? We'll find out. Nice, we've got the spare GPIO pin here. We've got the I2C connectors here for future expansion. There's this soft key switch option, which I think I may end up using. I'm trying to decide whether to go ahead and put headers in these other positions, just so they're preloaded. There's a couple of free driver lines around this package, which we could add, just so we've got them already. Again, I'm trying to pre-do all this without the switches on it, just because I think it makes it easier to work. So these are not the best looking. That almost looks like, you know, there's no solder on it. It almost looks like a pull, but it's not. Five and a 2. I think I'm okay with that. Ooh, touch the Pi with the soldering pencil. Nope, they're in square. We can finish soldering these up. You know, if you're not planning to expand your system in any way, you probably don't need to do all this. But again, for me, just getting them in place ahead of time. Then if I ever want to use them, they're actually there. I think is a good idea. Let's go ahead and pick up these 2 sets of free driver lines. Both of those went in pretty stiff, so I think they'll hang there just fine on their own to be soldered. Right up against the socket here. Don't like that. Look at that solder joint. You could see if you had the switches on and you were trying to get down in here to solder this, it would be really difficult. You don't want to touch the LED and melt it. You don't want to touch one of the switch toggles. Plastic toggles, you'd melt that, and it would just be an unhappy day all around. There's the soft key switch option up here. felt like it went in plenty tight to hold itself in place while I solder. Not happy with that solder joint. Still not happy with it. So all of those are covered. I really feel like I should put those blocks in as well. Might as well do it while we're here. A roll of electrical tape just rolled off the bench onto the floor and tried to hide. I may never use these options, but it's not going to hurt to have them preloaded. And these are going in rather loose. I will need to use some tape to hold them in place. So this will be tack one pin, square them. They really don't want to sit in flush. Now they're being stubborn. I'll just tack one pin and then I will remelt and square them. Being careful here not to touch the LEDs. And as you can see, all of those are horribly not straight. So, ow. I need to get my finger on the one pin that I was heating and burn myself a little bit. They look square and flush. We can solder those up. And I guess I'm just going to add the caps while I'm here and just be done with it without the Max 232 devices in the sockets. I believe this will all be isolated. It shouldn't matter in the functioning. I hear a dog whining someplace. They want their breakfast. As do I. After several days of gorgeous weather here in Seattle, it is raining, which is good. My flower beds needed the rain. So, yep, somebody's whining down there. I'm happy with that. We will drop in caps if I've got them here. Here they are. What's the spacing on those look like? Sure these are 104s. And they are. And I think these will be the right spacing. If I can get it through there. Nope, not that one. I've got a little mixed bag here, or mixed box. As you can see here, that's just a huge selection of 104s. That should work. Yep. So I need to find 10 of them that don't have the leads bent. wanted fell back in, the one I didn't fall back in. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's got to be one more down in there. 10. So using these 0.1 microfarads, this will require a newer Max 232 or equivalent device. Which is fine. I'm just getting them in so the marking on the package has the 104 facing out where it can be read, rather than in towards the IC socket where it would be harder to see. Again, these little ceramic caps aren't polarized. It doesn't really matter, but a little bit of extra effort makes me happy. Kind of feeds into the anal part of my personality. Laying flush. I thought he wasn't in flush, but he is, so. There. You go there. This blade that leads a bit to hold it up flush. Oh, does that suck? Got to be really careful here because there is little bits of dead solder all over the bench, and I don't need it creating solder balls. That will have to get cleaned up here as soon as we're done. Do not want that solder dust all over the pie or the board here. That's just a mess. There's 2 more to put in. Oh, little buddy, why are you down there moaning, huh? Oh, he's a very social little guy. likes to be near me as much as he can, which is fine. I may have mentioned this before. He has cancer. He's an elderly adoption. I adopted him. He's about 15, sometime after Christmas this year. And he's got health issues, including cancer. So we're spending a lot of time at the vet. And he's a great little dog. He really is. Just such a great, loving little guy. He just seems very grateful to be here. He came out of a pretty difficult situation. No fault of the owner that had him before. Well, anyhow, we stuffed out the two Max 232 driver spots. Got all the caps around them to produce the plus and the voltage rails, the plus and minus 12 or plus and minus 15, whatever they are. We've got all the expansions headers in for future playing with it. I really think this will kind of finish up this video here. We've trimmed the posts so the pie sits a little more flush down. Pretty happy with how things are coming together. Still impressed with the design and the board. The little prototyping area is really nice. He's got power rails on it. That should be fun to play with. So I will stop recording here, clean the bench. Do not need all that dead solder dust there. It's been cleaned off the tip of the pencils. It's all oxidized and nasty. Getting into things. And we'll probably pick up the switches in the next video. So we'll talk soon.